That might be why he dipped into the education fund. When I asked David about it, he refused to disclose what he had spent the money on. Finally, he snapped. I earn this money now, so how I spend it is my business. You and Misty eat because of me, so stop complaining. I tried to discuss the money issue multiple times, but David wouldn't budge. Our conversations went nowhere. Then David dropped a bombshell. A friend invited me to their wedding overseas. I couldn't believe my ears. Even if his friends cover some travel expenses, going overseas would still cost a fair amount. We are in a situation where we can't even effort Misty's education, and how can we effort an overseas trip? I tried to discuss this, but David ignored me and started preparing for the trip. Honestly, I considered divorce, but thinking of Misty held me back. She only has one father, and I couldn't bring myself to take that away from her. The day before David's departure arrived, and I was stuck with a high fever. I hadn't had a fever in a long time, and this might be the first time as an adult. Headaches, nausea, dizziness, and body aches clouded my consciousness. Can you please skip the wedding? I'm really struggling with this fever. I asked weakly. David laughed and said, "You'll be fine if you sleep it off." He even added, "Stop being so needy. Handle it yourself. You can't even manage yourself, and you are not even working. Could you at least get some food for Misty? She hasn't eaten properly since yesterday," I pleaded. David sighed heavily and said, "I don't have time for that, and I don't want to catch anything. I'm staying in a hotel tonight." And he really did leave us to attend the overseas wedding. At that moment, suffering from a high fever, I made up my mind. For Misty's sake, I had to let go of such a selfish man like David. 5 days later, David returned in high spirits. "I'm back. Why are Dad and Mom here?" David's parents are in the living room. My parents-in-law don't answer. "What's going on? Where's Allison?" It was Misty who answered David's question. "Mom is in heaven now." "What? What are you talking about?" David, thinking Misty was joking, burst into laughter. His parents shook their heads in disbelief. "What a foolish thing you've done. It's too late for anything now." David looked bewildered, not understanding the meaning of their words. "Wait, did Allison really die from that high fever?" Muttering this, David watched as his parents left the house with Misty. Misty waved at her father. "Bye-bye." David, as usual, ignored her. His parents had got in the car. That was the plan. My parents and I were quietly waiting in the kids' room. I had my phone connected to my in-laws and was watching the living room through a hidden camera on my computer. My sister, who was waiting nearby, would pick up Misty since there were things we didn't want her to hear. Only, my in-laws remained in the car. While David was overseas, I had told both sets of parents about his terrible behavior. I wanted to divorce David, but I knew he would refuse to pay alimony or child support. So, I wanted them to know the truth to help with the divorce. I told Misty she might not see David again, and because she said she wanted to see him one last time, I had the in-laws stay in the living room. Misty didn't object to not seeing her father again. She might have understood, even at her young age, that her father was treating her poorly. I had to prioritize Misty's care from now on. I wondered how David would react to Misty's words that Mom is in heaven. Would he reflect on his actions or apologize in tears? I continued to watch the hidden camera in silence, but then David did something unexpected. He suddenly started making a phone call. His voice was elated. "Brianna, I don't know the details yet, but it seems my wife is dead. Finally, the obstacle is gone. I should get the insurance money. Let the old folks raise Misty. Let's live together. You're the only one I love, Brianna." We realized then that David had been having an affair, and he considered me and our child obstacles, planning to use the insurance money to remarry this woman. My parents, who were watching the hidden camera footage with me, were also furious. Since I was on the phone with my in-laws, they had heard David's voice too. They were also angry at David. I signaled to my parents and my in-laws, and we all moved to the living room where David was. Seeing this, David hung up the phone in shock. "Wait, Allison, but I thought you were in heaven." I couldn't help but laugh at David's stupidity. Heaven is what Misty calls her room. It was sky blue sheets and white pillows. You wouldn't know because you never talked to her. "Wait, Is that so? I thought. No, never mind. David, not realizing we had heard his phone call, tried to cover up his tracks. But it was too late. Stop making excuses. We have been watching you on a hidden camera. You left your family with high fevers to go to a wedding, and you have been having an affair? No, that's not true. I haven't been. I cut him off. No more excuses. The decision is made. We are getting a divorce, and I'll be seeking alimony and child support, so be prepared. After I spoke, my father-in-law yelled, his face red with anger. If you get divorced, never show your face here again. You're no longer our son. Right after that, David's cell phone rang, filling the room with his ringtone. David didn't move, so I grabbed his phone to check. The caller was Brianna, David's mistress. I answered the call and put it on speaker so everyone could hear. Hello. What was that call about earlier? Living together is a joke, right? I have a fiancé, so stop getting the wrong idea. I can't be with a delusional man. Don't contact me again. With that, she hung up. David, now dumbed by his mistress too, turned pale and groveled at my feet begging for forgiveness. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. If my family disowns me, you're the only one I can rely on. Plus, I can't afford to pay alimony or anything like that. I've already spent so much on Brianna during this trip. David started rambling, even though no one asked him to explain. I glared at him. So you didn't go to a wedding? You abandoned your family for a romantic getaway? Well, you see. David couldn't find the words to defend himself. To think he was foolish enough to abandon his family and ruin himself by confessing an affair? I wondered why I ever married such an idiot. I should have decided to divorce him much sooner. Watching David continue to make a fool of himself, I resolved to move on with my life. Just Misty and me. Later, I checked David's phone and found numerous photos and videos from his trip with his mistress. The story about attending a friend's wedding was clearly a lie. I took this evidence to a lawyer. I formally filed for divorce, seeking compensation and child support. The lawyer visited Brianna, who apparently works at a nightclub, to verify the amount David had spent on her. She claimed she was just entertaining an old man as part of her job, but David foolishly insisted they were in love, causing a big fuss. It became clear that David had been financially supporting Brianna. That's probably why he had been giving me so little for living expenses and even dipping into Misty's college fund. David's life became miserable, burdened with debt from his lavish spending and now additional compensation. It also turned out that he lost his standing at his company when his affair and romantic trips came to light. Apparently, the nightclub where Brianna works is a popular spot for David's colleagues. So David confronted Brianna, causing a scene. Some of David's coworkers were there, and word of the affair spread throughout the company. I guess he confronted her because he didn't know she was engaged, but I can't be sure. It's pathetic how he let a young woman manipulate him. This incident led to David becoming isolated at work. He really is a hopeless case. I heard David got demoted and took a significant pay cut. The lawyer who helped me with the divorce and alimony also updated me on Brianna's situation. It seems she met a grim end too. Her fiancé, a regular at the club, found out about her affair with David and called off her engagement. He even demanded compensation for the wedding expenses they had already incurred. Struggling to pay the hefty sum, Brianna tried to swindle money from other customers, but of course, you can't keep something like that a secret. As expected, the club found out and fired her. Now, Brianna is working multiple part-time jobs to pay off her debts, living alone in a cramped apartment. As for me, I moved back home and am living with my parents and Misty. I'm relieved to be away from the neighbors who believed the rumors and lies David spread about me. Life is much more relaxed now. My parents dote on Misty, who seems happier than when she lived with David. David has come to my parents' house a few times, begging for another chance, but my dad has been turning him away. Neither Misty nor I have any desire to see him. If Misty ever says she wants to see him, I'll consider it, but for now, she doesn't want to meet her father. I have no intention of reconciling with David, so there's no reason to talk to him. If he becomes too persistent, I'm considering involving the police. Looking at where David and his mistress Brianna are now, I realize how scary affairs can be. They have lost everything and are forced to live a bottom-tier life. It's their own fault. From now on, I want to focus on cherishing the happiness I have with my parents and Misty and forget about David. My name is Myra. I reconnected with Corey, my current partner, at a high school reunion. Back in high school, we just knew each other's names and faces, but we hit it off at the reunion after sitting next to each other and started dating soon after. Corey proposed to me recently, so we are getting married. I had met my future in-laws, father-in-law and mother-in-law a few times since Corey and I started dating. The only person I hadn't met was Corey's sister, Kristen. While father-in-law and mother-in-law always welcomed me warmly, Kristen would never come out of her room, and it's been bothering me. What does Kristen think of me? Don't worry about her. She's just shy. On the day of the family meeting, Corey tried to calm my nerves by saying that Kristen was just shy. I felt relieved hearing Corey's words, but we soon discovered that the assumption she's just shy was a major mistake. We're so happy that you're going to be Corey's wife. Corey, you've really stepped up. Make sure you make Myra happy. I will. Both father-in-law and mother-in-law were thrilled when we told them we're getting married. Just need to tell Kristen too, mother-in-law said, leaving her seat. As Corey, father-in-law, and I were chatting, a loud voice came from Kristen's room. What? Startled, we heard the sound of a door slamming. Kristen stormed into the room and glared at me. I will never accept this marriage. As I stood there shocked, mother-in-law followed Kristen saying, hold on, Kristen. But Kristen didn't stop. Marriage is disgusting. Just the thought of having strangers in the house is bad enough. But getting married? Seriously, no way. That's just gross. Kristen, father-in-law raised his voice in anger, but Kristen ignored him, scanning me from head to toe. Then, crossing her arms, she snorted. Corey's taste in women is just awful. Why on earth would he marry someone as unattractive as you? Just thinking about what the kids would look like sends shivers down my spine. Can Corey even handle raising a child like this? Of course he can. What are you even saying, sis? Anyway, I'm against this marriage. I don't want her in our family. Don't you dare show your face here ever again. At Kristen's outburst, Corey and his parents scramble in panic. Stop it. They all try to silence Kristen, their voices seeming to echo from far away. Gathering myself, I stood up and said something I never thought I would say. Fine. I won't ever come back to this house. Myra, I'm sorry for my sister. I want to marry you. Yeah, I still want to marry Corey. We will get married, but I will never come to this house again, and I will never see Kristen for the rest of my life. This discussion is over. I said I don't want you to get married. Ignoring Kristen's yelling, I started to prepare to leave. As I was leaving, I looked at Kristen and said, I don't need your approval for the marriage. Corey's parents' blessing is more than enough, rest assured, since we'll never meet again. There won't be any awkward family get-togethers, no matter how much you object. I won't give up marrying Corey. Goodbye, I'll never forget what you've said to me. Keeping a straight face, I bid my goodbyes to my shocked in-laws and left. I hurried home, with Corey frantically following behind, apologizing with a near-teary face. Truth be told, I was really hurt by Kristen's words. Once we were out of sight of his parents and Kristen, tears started to flow as Corey apologized to me. It's really sad that your sister won't accept our marriage and that I can never return to that house, but I still want to marry you, Corey. I'm sorry I'm not the woman Kristen thinks I should be. Folding back tears and with a trembling voice, I got hugged by Corey, who told me, you've done nothing wrong, Myra. Feeling his warmth, I reaffirmed my commitment to marrying Corey. As I had declared, Corey and I got married and started our life together. We had a wedding and both of us agreed not to invite Kristen. Corey's parents repeatedly apologized for Kristen's behavior, but our relationship with them remained good. Blessed by the family, except Kristen, Corey and I started our married life. However, Kristen was furious when she found out we got married. She yelled at Corey over the phone on our wedding night. Why did you marry such an awful woman? This is the worst. Corey eventually just put his phone aside. Fed up with the noise, he finally said, just leave us alone, in a tired voice as he hung up. Since then, our marriage has been problem-free. Since I had declared that I wouldn't visit my in-laws, I haven't been to their place since that day. Instead, my in-laws, concerned about our lives, have been visiting us occasionally. Whenever they visit it, they apologize for Kristen's behavior, to which I would reply, "It's okay. I'm happy I married Corey." Looking back, I think it's a good thing we've cut ties with Kristen, who is quite a handful. If we hadn't, I shudder to think we'd still be hearing complaints from her. Then, just a few months into our marriage, I became pregnant. Corey was ecstatic. Even before we knew the baby's gender, he'd already started buying baby clothes and reading fatherhood books. I was feeling really happy. Then one day, I received a call from an unknown number. Though skeptical, I thought it might be from the maternity clinic or the local government office, so I answered, and I heard a voice I didn't want to hear. "Myra? Long time no see. It's your sister-in-law, Kristen." Why is Kristen calling me now, especially after she so adamantly rejected me becoming part of the family? Confused, I muttered, "Why?" And Kristen filled me in. "I found your number in Mom's phone." Kristen informed me. "Corey has blocked me, so I thought I'd tell you." "Tell me what?" Speaking in a much gentler tone than I remember, Kristen dropped a bombshell. "I'm getting married. To Ronald, a classmate of you and Corey." Ronald was indeed our high school classmate. According to Kristen, they started dating through a work connection, which happened to be Ronald. Both Kristen and Ronald work locally, so it's not surprising they'd cross paths. But I couldn't hide my shock that Kristen, who had been so against marriage, was now planning to tie the knot. "You're getting married? You, Kristen?" "Yes." Why the surprised tone? "It's rude. Ronald will be at the next family meeting, so you both should come. It'd be weird if you weren't there." Okay." Had Kristen forgotten everything she had said and done? She had yelled at me, humiliated Corey and her parents, and never once apologized. I felt the back of my head heat up with anger. "We'll be looking forward to it," I said, keeping my cool. "Just so you know, don't mess this up. If you ruin my marriage with Ronald, you won't get away with it." After being told off by Kristen, I stood in front of the calendar. I circled the date Ronald told us he'd be coming for a family meeting at my in-laws. I waited for that day with bated breath. Days passed, and finally the day Ronald was set to visit arrived. Corey and I dressed up nicely and left our house to greet him. When we reached the front of my in-laws' property, it seemed Ronald had just arrived. Seeing Ronald and Kristen waving at us from their car, Corey and I smiled back. "It's been a while since the wedding. Myra and Corey, how have you been?" "We've been good, Ronald. Myra's expecting, actually." "Really? Congratulations." Ronald greeted me with his familiar, warm smile from high school. He leaned in towards the baby bump and said, "Can't wait for you to join us, little one." "Thank you," I replied. Standing next to Ronald, Kristen walks onto the property of her in-laws and gently says, "Let's go." "No," I responded with a smile. "I'm not allowed inside the house anymore. So, Ronald, I'm sorry, but I'll have to consider this family meeting over." "Huh?" Kristen's face flushed with rage while Ronald looked puzzled. Realizing Ronald was clueless, I decided to clarify. When Corey and I came to introduce ourselves as a couple, Kristen opposed us. She said that we were not welcome, that our union was disgusting, and that we should never come back. We married despite her, and that's why she didn't come to our wedding. What? Kristen told me she was sick during the wedding. That's not true. Myra, what are you talking about? Stop lying. Trying to suppress her anger, Kristen spouts lies. I can't help but chuckle. I mean, come on, Kristen. You've got amnesia or something. You've made fun of me countless times. You even told me to my face that I'm ugly. You said that the baby I'm expecting will have my face. And you questioned if Corey could raise such a child. Forgotten all that? Ronald, everything Myra is saying is a complete lie. What are you talking about, Myra? Stop saying stupid stuff. Kristen, just so you don't forget, let me remind you. I will never enter this house, and I will never forget what you've said to me. Kristen looks at me with cold eyes and forcibly grabs my hand. Enough of this nonsense. Even Ronald is losing patience. Let's get inside. Corey and Ronald release my hand from Kristen's forceful grip. Ronald? Kristen falls flat on her but, looking dazed. Her pretty dress is now soiled with dirt. Ronald doesn't offer her a hand and just looks down at her. Is what Myra saying true? It's a lie, all lies. Myra has a problem with making stuff up, right, Corey? Kristen almost threatens with her tone, but Corey sighs. Sis, you're embarrassing yourself. What Myra's saying is true. If you're thinking of marrying Ronald, you better acknowledge this aspect of yourself. Upon hearing Corey's words, Ronald pauses for a moment and then starts walking towards the car. Wait, Ronald. Kristen chases after Ronald in her dirt-covered dress, but he won't let her into the car. I may be overstepping by intervening in my brother's marriage, but I can't consider marrying someone who insults not just me, but even a child who isn't yet born. No offense to the family, but I'll be going home today. We'll talk some other time. Don't say that. Please, Ronald. Ronald. Corey, Myra. Thanks for letting me know about Kristen before we got married. Ronald thanked us and drove away. Wait up. Kristen chased after the car, crying. Along the way, she stumbled and fell, continuing to cry. You'd think her own brother, Corey, would go to help, but instead, he takes my hand. Let's go. I can't let someone who yanks a pregnant woman's hand around be in the same space as Myra. As we walk back home, Kristen's cries linger for a while. After we get home, Corey contacts his parents-in-law. After being told to say our greetings, we stood at the front of the property and spilled the beans about the past. This led Corey to explain that Kristen and Ronald's engagement had probably fallen apart. My in-laws responded by saying it couldn't be helped. When they visited us later, I apologized for what I had done to Kristen, even if it was out of revenge. They told me, don't worry, what she did was true. According to my in-laws, Kristen had been shedding herself in her room ever since the engagement broke off. Ronald has a stable government job and Kristen, who had thought she'd be living a stable life too, quit her job early on and is now unemployed. I heard she sneaks into the kitchen late at night to grab a meal, as if she's stealing it, then goes back to her room, avoiding any contact with her parents. But Kristen is unpredictable. Both Corey and I have blocked Kristen's phone number. We moved to a bigger house since we have a baby on the way and specifically asked my in-laws not to share our new address with Kristen. It seems like our decision was the right one. After we moved, Kristen went to our old place and began to bang and kick the front door, shouting, "Open up." Because of her loud ruckus, a neighbor ended up reporting her to the police. It seemed like the in-laws were at their wits' end dealing with Kristen, and after she caused some legal trouble, they kicked her out of their home. Regretting that they had spoiled Kristen, they gave her enough money to live on her own for a while. Since then, I've heard Kristen has been making ends meet in a small apartment with a part-time job. As for Corey and me, we welcomed a healthy, beautiful baby into the world. Just like Kristen said, our baby did look like me, and it was a very adorable little girl. Looking back at when Kristen opposed our marriage, I'm convinced that my unwavering decision to marry was the right one. Thanks to the courage I had back then to stand up to Kristen, I'm now enjoying a happy life with a loving husband and a cute daughter. Family trips are more enjoyable without the daughter-in-law. She's just in the way. From the window of the speeding car, my mother-in-law looked down on me with a mocking smile. It all started on the first day of a family vacation with my husband's family. On the way to a luxury hotel, we stopped at a highway gas station, and suddenly I was left behind all alone. I was completely lost and stood frozen on the spot, a moment I'll never forget. My name is Susan. I'm 30 years old, and I focus on housework, not working outside the home. My husband, Thomas, is a management consultant and often away from home. Since I spend a lot of time alone and my husband has been covering all of mother-in-law's living expenses since my father-in-law passed away, we decided to live with her in our home. Mother-in-law was thrilled that her only son was moving back home, but she seemed displeased that I, his wife, was coming along. I'm not glamorous, and I have no interest in designer brands. I do a lot of water-related chores, so even with care, my hands get rough and I choose clothes that are easy to move in. To mother-in-law, I seemed like an embarrassing daughter-in-law to show others. Mother-in-law, Linda, has always been a show-off, obsessed with appearance and brands. She's long since spent her grandfather's inheritance and her savings, but she has no intention of changing her luxurious lifestyle, always begging my husband for more. My husband always firmly refused, saying, "I'm giving you living expenses, not money for luxuries." But mother-in-law never gave up, always causing trouble. Furthermore, my sister-in-law and her husband live nearby. Sister-in-law, Jessica, has the same character as her mother, always making snide remarks like, "Thomas could do better than a plain woman like you." She comes to our house every day, demanding meals, baths, and drinks, but never contributes money or helps with chores. You're Thomas's wife, so it's only natural that you do all the housework. You're not good looking, so at least keep the house clean. Thomas is too kind. Susan has always been poor and doesn't understand anything about brands, right? Yet mother-in-law would tell my husband, "I do all the housework myself." And sister-in-law would claim, "We're good friends." I've been working in customer service, so I've been using that experience to avoid major conflicts with mother-in-law and sister-in-law for the past few years. But my husband noticed everything, from me doing all the housework to sister-in-law's terrible attitude, but he didn't confront them directly because I asked him not to. I wanted to avoid a complete breakdown with my husband's family, no matter what they did to me. My husband respected my feelings. But you don't have to push yourself too hard. I'm okay with cutting ties and living separately. Thank you, but I want to try a little harder. So I'm thinking of planning a family trip to improve our relationship. What do you think? That sounds good. I can take time off next month. So let's all go on this year's trip. Since we were dating, my husband and I have been traveling regularly. Even after moving in with my mother-in-law, my husband and I enjoy occasional trips just for the two of us. But once mother-in-law and my sister-in-law realized we were staying at luxury and famous hotels, they insisted on coming along. You two are so heartless going on luxurious trips without us. From now on, take us with you and make sure it's extravagant. Because they were so persistent, I told them that this time we had booked a luxurious hotel for the whole family, including sister-in-law's husband. Mother-in-law and sister-in-law were thrilled. But just before the trip, my husband's work made it impossible for him to join us. I thought about postponing the trip, but mother-in-law had already bragged to the neighbors about the souvenirs, so she insisted we couldn't change the plans now. Reluctantly, I agreed to go with the four of us, excluding my husband. On the day, I put mother-in-law and sister-in-law's luggage in the trunk, and since there was no room left, I carried my travel bag inside the car. Throughout the drive, mother-in-law and sister-in-law kept making snide remarks from the back seat. Feeling fed up, I glanced at the empty passenger seat where only my travel bag sat, and I began to feel a little uneasy without my husband. Even as I drove onto the highway, mother-in-law's complaints never stopped. "You're driving so slowly. Are you just careless because Thomas isn't here? Really? There was an accident today, so you're just good at making excuses. You must have deceived Thomas the same way." I didn't deceive anyone. If only slow Susan weren't here, this trip would be more fun. Right, Mom? Yes, indeed. Eventually, as we were about to arrive at yet another gas station, sister-in-law surprisingly suggested, "Let my husband drive the rest of the way." "You must be tired, Susan." Having been forced to prepare mother-in-law's luggage and clean the house before our early departure, I was exhausted and agreed. "Susan, could you buy drinks for everyone?" As I got out of the car to switch drivers, mother-in-law gave me a friendly smile, unlike her usual self. "Sure, that's fine." Mother-in-law and sister-in-law were unusually kind. Maybe they want to improve our relationship just like I do. That's good. I felt relieved and was about to walk away from the car when suddenly the engine started, and mother-in-law threw my luggage out of the car. Then mother-in-law yelled at me with a big smile. "Family trips are more enjoyable without the daughter-in-law. You're just in the way." I stood there, watching the car drive away, leaving me and my travel bag behind. I was completely lost and stood still for a moment. I will never forget the words mother-in-law said to me at that moment. Finally, I realized that no matter how much I did for mother-in-law and sister-in-law, it was all in vain. Reaching for my travel bag left in the parking space, my vision suddenly blurred. Surprised, I ran to the restroom, covering my eyes with a hand towel, and tears began to flow uncontrollably. I don't remember how long I was there, but I noticed a call on my mobile phone and checked the message. It was from my husband, who had finished work early, expressing concern about the trip with mother-in-law and the others. While I was reading the message, my husband called. Thomas, I'm alone at a highway gas station right now. What? What happened? Hearing his voice, I couldn't help but cry again. He patiently listened to my explanation without rushing me. I'm really sorry that Mom and the others did this to you. I'll come pick you up right away. I'm sorry this happened. Why are you apologizing, Susan? Because I wanted to get along with your precious family and I couldn't. I want you to tell me how you really feel. Do you still want to try to make things work with Mom and the others? Right now, I can only think that it's too difficult. I see. I'm sorry for what my family did. I'll handle the separation and everything else with Mom and the others. But is it okay for you to leave your feelings as they are? My feelings? You've been holding back for me all this time, haven't you? Thinking back, I realized that I had always been holding back. But I had been angry with my unreasonable mother-in-law and insensitive sister-in-law all this time. Yes, I can't be with those people. I absolutely hate it. Expressing the anger I had been suppressing felt surprisingly refreshing. You can do whatever you want from now on, Susan. I'll take care of the rest. I understand. No matter what happens, I won't let them anymore. I made that firm resolution. A few hours later, my husband came to pick me up at the gas station. Being with him made me naturally smile, and I realized how calmly and happily we could spend time together, even though we were traveling the same distance. I couldn't help but grin a little, even though I felt bad for my worried husband. Thanks to his thoughtful care, I was able to rest well when we got home. The next day, my husband made a surprising proposal. I've narrowed down the options for our new home to places near Susan's parents' house. What? What's going on all of a sudden? I want to make sure we're not bothered by Mom and the others, so let's finish moving during the 3 days of the trip. Will it be difficult for you to move, Susan? My careful and planned husband would never do something so sudden. I felt that he was quite angry inside, but he had a lovely smile for me. I'm all for moving. Let's get started right away. We quickly found a new home and moving company, and we were able to move without any problems. During this time, I received several emails from mother-in-law and the others. We're having the best trip without you. The hotel is luxurious and wonderful. Make sure it's at this level next time. Dinner was the most extravagant and delicious ever. It's even more fun without seeing Susan's ugly face. Traveling with just the family is so much more relaxing. The jacuzzi is amazing. Their enjoyment of the luxurious time at the high-end hotel came through clearly. Enjoy it while you can. I was looking forward to what would happen next. At around 10 a.m. on the checkout day, as expected, I received a call from mother-in-law. Susan, what's going on? What do you mean? They told me the accommodation fee is for $100,000 if the young lady isn't there. It's completely different from what you told us at first. It's only natural that the regular accommodation fee applies since I booked it through my connections and I'm not there. What do you mean? That hotel is run by my relatives. What? That's why we were able to stay at a special rate. Well, I didn't know that. By the way, all the hotels we've stayed at on our trips were run by those relatives, so we were able to stay at a discount. Susan, you've never told us that before. Thomas told me to keep quiet about it because if Linda and the others found out, they'd demand it be free. What's that? Anyway, the accommodation fee is correct, so please pay it yourself. Wait a minute, I can't pay $100,000. I didn't go on the trip, so I can't pay for you all. Don't say that. Do something. We're family, right? You said the wife of your son isn't family, didn't you? That's. You all enjoyed yourselves as a family, so please pay as a family. Goodbye. I ignored mother-in-law, who was still yelling on the other end of the phone, and hung up, feeling refreshed. In the end, mother-in-law and the others borrowed money from a shady source to pay for the accommodation or something like that. Furthermore, when they returned home, they couldn't get living expenses from my husband or me since we had moved, and they ended up fighting and parting ways with sister-in-law's family. Sister-in-law's family also deteriorated their relationship and divorced. Sister-in-law, abandoned by her husband and without income, looked for work in the nightlife, but seemed to have trouble finding employment due to her bad personality. With no one left to rely on, mother-in-law even went to my husband's company to seek help. At that time, mother-in-law looked older than her age, with hollow eyes, a haggard face, and dirty clothes. Even when she was crying and begging in the company lobby to live with us, my husband firmly declared a break in relations. After that, mother-in-law ended up working exhaustively at a terrible live-in job. Several years have passed, and now we have a lovely child and are living very happily. We are planning to stay at that luxury hotel we couldn't go to before, just the three of us, as a family. The hotel owner's relative invited us because they want to meet our child. We are looking forward to it very much. Wouldn't it have been embarrassing to have a painting like that on the front porch? My daughter-in-law, Macy, who had sold my prized painting on a flea market app without my permission, stated flatly. My mother had done a colored pencil drawing of Gerberas for me from her hospital bed before she died. That drawing was a memento of my late mother. I know, but I can't hang an amateur drawing because it's too shabby. Do you think you should talk to me like that, even though you are my daughter-in-law? I said boldly, but Macy was unfazed. She drew her arms across her chest and stared at me. Please consider your position. We will be taking care of you in the future, right? It's that deciding line again. So you're allowed to sell my belongings without my permission? I'm your one and only son's wife. Think about how much we are going to take care of you. Macy gave me one more look before walking out the door, her luxury brand shoes clacking. I'd be moving into a new house alone the next day. Macy knew this and sold the painting to harass me. Henry, my son, and Macy, my daughter-in-law, had sold my belongings without my permission before. I was furious, but resigned to the fact that I would never get them back. But I'll never forgive her for selling my mother's mementos. Both Macy and Henry, who was always at her disposal, irritate me. I'll completely cut ties from my son and wife when I move into my new house tomorrow. My husband, son, and wife can live in this old house. I am Amy, a 50-year-old housewife. For years, I did all of the housework while working part-time at a factory. I look after my family, which includes my husband, my only son, and as of 3 years ago, my daughter-in-law, Macy. My mother, who raised me as a single mother, died 6 months ago. She left me a large sum of money from her life insurance policy. I took advantage of the opportunity to purchase a small, new house and decided to divorce my husband, with whom I had a strained relationship. The day before I moved in, Macy sold my mother's painting without my permission. When I told my husband we were splitting up, he simply said, "Do whatever you want." During our many years as a couple, our relationship had cooled. I believe neither of us did anything wrong and that what happened was unavoidable. My son and his wife, who lived with us, were the ones who were against my leaving. Who will do the housework if you leave? Aren't you a housewife? I am a civil servant like Henry, so I am not like you who only works part-time. It's appalling to hear a mother throw her family out of the house. My son and his wife both continued to complain as I was packing. First and foremost, why are you buying a house now? It's the money my mother left me, and it's up to me what I do with it. When the insurance money arrives, you should put it to good use for your family. A house where you'll live alone is a squandering of money. She's right. You should have shared grandmother's insurance money with us. Henry's wife was a brand-obsessed woman who never washes a single pair of underwear and is constantly taking dance, yoga, English conversation, and other classes. My son, who is at her beck and call, blames me all at the same time. This was enough for me. My friend Jane, who lives near my new house, invited me over the night I moved in to join her for dinner. My husband is out drinking today too, so I thought it would be perfect. Thank you very much. I still haven't unpacked anything. Jane's house is magnificent. She and her husband both love dogs, so they built a house to accommodate a large dog. In fact, 3 Dobermans are currently resting quietly in the living room's corner. I told Jane about Henry and Macy while eating a hamburger she'd prepared for me. What's the deal with your daughter-in-law? And I'm sorry, but your son is also pitiful. Henry used to be a stronger person, but now he's at the mercy of his wife. I'm tired of it. One of the large dogs approached me and nuzzled my feet, as if to console me. It was Hannah, the female of the 3 Dobermans. Hannah is much gentler than my son. All of our dogs are smart and good. Jane used to be a trainer because she's so good with dogs. Her 3 new dogs are large and scary in appearance, but are really gentle and extremely intelligent. They would never attack anyone, but they will bark at uninvited guests if Jane instructs them to. I wish I had a dog as gentle as Hannah is. Why don't you get yourself one? I'll train it for you. Indeed, I am free to do whatever I want as of today. In a new house, you begin a new life. Isn't that right? I thought so too. Macy and I are moving to my parents' house next month. At the end of the month, my son called me with this news. I'd just gotten used to living alone and was starting to enjoy my independence. Your parents' house? Oh, you're moving to Macy's parents' house? No, it's my mother's house. My home? You already live at your father's house. I wasn't sure what he was saying. I talked with Macy. After all, my parents' house is my mother's house, not my father's, and we decided to move to your house. No, my house isn't big enough for the 3 of us. I was not going to put up with Henry and Macy bossing me around and making me do all of the housework. But one of the rooms does have a place to sleep. You can sleep in the living room corner, and we can use that space as our bedroom. Don't be ridiculous. What are you talking about? You want me to sleep in the living room corner? I could feel my face getting hot with rage. We're coming, even if you don't like it. I'll start by shipping you a couple of boxes. I'm not going to accept them. Well, then I'll think of something. Anyway, I'm coming, so please look after me, Henry said, and abruptly hung up the phone. I don't want this. I despise the idea of Henry and Macy bossing me around and forcing me to do all the housework. That is something I will not allow to happen. The next day, Jane and I went to a family restaurant. I wanted her to listen to my story. I'm sorry, but you have the worst son and daughter-in-law. As she sipped her latte, Jane continued, you must not accept it under any circumstances. You must politely say no. Well, since it is those 2, they might hire a moving company. I don't know what to do. To wash down my pitiful feelings, I drank a sip of jasmine tea. I enjoy this tea, but it is quite bitter. Well, it is difficult to say no when the movers will come. If we're not careful, we might get into trouble. We have to do something to make them not want to come to my house. I can't stand the way they're acting. Well, we could ask my children for help. What? Hannah and the dogs. Hannah, son, and Sky are Jane's 3 kids. Her 3 beloved Dobermans. My dogs will bark, growl, and act out to some extent on command. I could ask them to scare them away or something. In fact, my son has been afraid of dogs since he was a child. It's difficult to live with a son and his wife who would sell their mother's mementos without permission. So, let's come up with something. I agree. Thank you very much, Jane. I felt a little relieved as a result of our conversation. When I returned home, I discovered that my son and his wife were serious. 2 large cardboard boxes had been stacked in front of the front door. These are Henry's and my possessions. We thought you would refuse the courier, so I brought them. We will move in next month, so please keep them in the house. Macy. My shoulders slumped as I read the note attached to the cardboard box. I had no choice but to bring the box inside, and when I opened it, I discovered many of their personal belongings. Henry's imported watches and leather jackets. Macy's designer bags, clothes, and shoes. They must have left behind valuable items I would not discard without permission. What a dirty move. How little they must think of me to sell off my mother's paintings or leave this luggage without my permission. Well, we could ask my children for help. Jane's voice from the family restaurant came to mind. I've occasionally accompanied Jane on dog walks since I settled in after the move. She invites me to accompany her for a change of scenery. She's a great friend to have. It means a lot to me. Why don't you sell their belongings? Macy would sell them on her own, wouldn't she? Yes. Even the memento my mother painted. Moon, a male dog, looks at me from the end of the leash I am holding. By the way, why do your son and wife want to live with you? They're both government employees and have money, so why don't they just live together? They don't like doing housework, especially Macy, because she's always learning, going out to play, or watching fashion and makeup videos. So you've been doing all the housework by yourself? Yes, my husband never did it, and Henry works overtime and travels a lot, and Macy is the same way. I recall hearing a conversation between my son and his wife on the day I announced my departure from our home. If you leave the house, who will do the housework? Well, you can. No, obviously not. I want your mother to do it. Jane sighed in disgust when I mentioned this. It wasn't until a week later that I received several phone calls from Macy. I finally answered in disgust after she phoned dozens of times. Your house is quite small, right? Yes, that's what I said. Henry said he saw you with 3 big dogs, and I wonder if 3 dogs like that could live in a small house. It struck me. Macy is obviously terrified of dogs. There are people all over the world who are terrified of dogs. One of them is Henry. Jane must have been with me when Henry saw her, but he must have been completely distracted by the dogs. I told you it's a small house. If you're worried, why don't you come back and take a look? I will. I want to check the inside of the house. Macy's voice unraveled a little. She decided that there was no dog in the house. Anyway, I'll be there this Sunday at 10 a.m., Macy said and hung up the phone. Okay, unexpectedly, I can take my revenge now. On Sunday, Henry and Macy came to my house as planned. You really came? I said I would come. You know, it's because you bought the house on a whim that we're in this messy situation. That's really true. You should have stayed quiet and continued to do the housework like before, complaining they took off their shoes and entered the house. Okay, that's it. I opened the living room door, gloating in my mind. Whoa. Ah. The next moment, my son and his wife screamed in unison. There were 2 Dobermans, Moon and Sky, sitting there. What? Are you kidding me? Mother, this dog. These are my dogs. Aren't they cute? Jane, the dog trainer over there, found them for me. Jane, who was sitting on the sofa, stood up and smiled at me. They are so cute because they are well trained. Moon, Sky, how do you say hello to our guests? The dogs barked at the same time. Macy said, oh no. Macy sat down with her head in her hands. Is she that bad with dogs? Oh, they're so cute. Don't worry. Moon, Sky, play with them. At the sound of Jane's voice, the 2 dogs ran over to Henry and Macy, respectively. They raised their paws, wagging their tails as if to say, let's play. Stop. Oh no. I'm scared. Macy shook her head and began to wriggle and shake. Moon just invited her to play with him, but Macy doesn't understand. I'm scared of dogs. Macy just lost it and burst into tears, snot running out of her nose. Oh dear. If you're going to live in my house, you'll have to get along with these kids, too. Make them stop. This ruined the makeup she had studied on YouTube and was so proud of. Her mascara was running, and the lame from her eyeshadow spread to her cheeks. Her tears and runny nose made the high-end foundation look soggy. With this face, she was going to take the train home. Hey, Mom, do something about it. Meanwhile, Henry, who had been jostled by the much larger Sky, fell on his backside and began to scoot away. Sky, thinking that he was playing, happily jumped on Henry. No, stop it. The dog is too big and scary. I suddenly looked at Henry's jeans and saw that the color of his crotch had darkened a bit. He was so afraid of the dog that he had peed himself. How pathetic. Moon, Sky, come here. Jane decided it was time to stop and called the dogs. Immediately, the 2 dogs left Henry and Macy and returned to her. Moon, Sky, down. With that one word, the dogs lay down at Jane's feet. They really are smart kids. Until now, even though I've been slaving away at my part-time job and housework, you've never helped me. Besides, when I said I was going to leave, you decided to live on your own. Do you think your mother is stupid? I spat out the words I had been holding back as my son and his wife stood up, crying. I left home because I was fed up with you. I am not your housekeeper. But doesn't that mean you have to? He's a well-trained and smart dog, and much gentler than you. Henry and Macy lacked their usual air of bravado. A husband with a wet crotch and a wife whose makeup is a mess. They make the perfect couple. You also sold off my precious things without my permission. I will never forgive you for selling my mother's painting. I said it at once and looked at Moon and Sky, who were meekly lying face down, before looking at my son and his wife again. This, a house with 2 dogs this big, is something we don't want. That's right, we'll give up moving. So give me back the stuff we left behind the other day, then we'll go home. They're still in the boxes in the next room. Take it and get out of here. As I pointed to the next room, Henry and Macy took a wide turn to avoid the dog before opening the door. Whoa! They both screamed again and fell on their butts. That's right, because another Doberman, Hannah, was sitting right next to the boxes in the room. Mom, the boxes. Please get them. I don't want to. You brought it yourself, so take it yourself. I peeked into the room and saw Hannah just sitting there with a calm expression on her face. I can't go near a dog like that. Then give up your stuff. You mean I should leave it? My bags and Henry's watches are in that box. You also got rid of my precious things without my permission, didn't you? I didn't ask you to leave them behind. I'm telling you, take it with you. Macy just glared at me for a moment. But then, perhaps remembering the dog's presence, she lowered her eyes with a sigh. Please, Mother, bring us the boxes. You and Macy have been making fun of me. You knew how important that painting that she sold off was to me, but you didn't stop her. Well, I'm sorry about that, but at that time, Jane came to me. Hannah, how do we greet our guests? Immediately, Hannah sat down and barked loudly. No! Stop it! Hearing Hannah's voice, the son and his wife must have reached their limit. With his wet jeans and her face covered in smudged makeup, they ran to the front door and got out of the house. After that, I sold all the personal belongings Henry and Macy had left behind to a pawn shop. I discovered that their belongings were of considerable luxury, with Henry's watch having a surprisingly high value and Macy's bag being of a particularly high class. The extravagance of these items left me in a state of dismay. Back at her house, Macy ended up being responsible for all the household chores. My former husband does not like Macy's housework. He constantly complains that the food is bad, the house is dirty, and the laundry is piled up. Macy can no longer go to her lessons because of her housework, and she has gained 10 kilograms due to the stress, and all of her frustration seems to be directed at Henry. Mom, I'm at my limit. Macy finally started hitting me. She's been fighting with Dad all the time. I want a divorce. One day, Henry called me, his voice exhausted. You chose your own wife, didn't you? You can take care of yourself. Of course, I would not give advice to Henry. I was sick and tired of being involved with that couple. Meanwhile, I bought a female Shiba Inu and asked Jane to train her. She's going to be a great dog. Jane smiled as she patted the head of the puppy I named Rio. Really, it's all thanks to you. I'm sorry for making the dogs play such an unpleasant role. That's okay. When I heard what you said, I was more upset than you were. But from now on, you and Rio can live together peacefully. Yes, from now on, I will enjoy my life and my time. With this determination in my heart, I